I want to introduce the folks that are up here with me, and then we'll get into the press conference. To my right is Weld County Coroner Carl Blesch. To my immediate right, Detective Dave Baumover from the Frederick Police Department, Chief Deputy District Attorney Steve Wren, Deputy District Attorney Pat Roach, and from the Frederick Police Department, Sergeant Ian Albert. Sergeant Albert has been the PIO from the Frederick Police Department. I first want to invite him up to say a few words, and then I'll comment about this morning. Sergeant Albert.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you. I'm only here to issue this statement, and upon doing so, my agency will not be conducting any interviews or answering any questions on the matter. On behalf of the men and women of the Frederick Police Department, I would like to thank our fellow law enforcement agencies, the countless citizens, and all those who contributed to this tireless investigation. It was a combined effort in serving justice today. In the names of Shan'ann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico. Today I am proud of the determination that was put forth by all those who worked with us on putting this man away. His deplorable actions were fought back vigorously by honest police work, coupled with the goodwill of caring and loving people. But most importantly, however, I want to send our thoughts and prayers to Frank, Sandy, Frankie Jr., and the entire Rissick family. I don't know if you will ever receive closure on this horrific act of evil. I just pray that our efforts have brought you all one step closer in doing so. Thank you.
As you all, I'm sure, are aware, the defendant in this case this morning was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences, plus a 48-year sentence for the unlawful termination of a pregnancy as it relates to Nico Watts. He was also sentenced to 12 years on each of the 3 Class 3 felonies for unlawful tampering with a deceased body, those being Shan'ann, Bella, and Celeste. All of those counts ran consecutively for a total of 3 consecutive life sentences plus 84 years in the Department of Corrections. This afternoon, with the cooperation of the Weld County Coroner, the autopsy reports will be available and become a public document. There are a few things that I want to talk about that you will see that are contained within those autopsy reports. I'm going to be very general at this point. I hope you understand, out of respect for the Rusick family who is still present. Part of the reason that we kept these sealed were for the following reasons. You will see in the autopsy report of Shan'ann Watts that forensic toxicology testing indicated that in spleen blood there was a blood alcohol level of 0.128. I want to be abundantly and very, very clear about this. This does not mean that she consumed alcohol, nor that she was intoxicated. We have consulted with the Weld County Coroner's Office. We have conducted with the forensic experts at the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. To a person, they have all indicated to us that that blood alcohol level is very, very consistent with normal human decomposition based upon the location and the manner that Shan'ann and Nico's bodies were buried. Secondly, you will see in the autopsy reports of Bella and Celeste a number of different substances, I think is probably the way, Mr. Blesch, that I want to address those. We have had those examined by both expert chemists as well as the coroner's office because we wanted to make sure that all of those substances could be attributed to the crude oil and the water that their bodies were found in and nothing more. The forensic experts confirmed for us that all of the substances found in those toxicology reports are consistent with being submerged in unrefined crude oil. Mr. Blesch, any other comments you want to make about that at this point?
Covered it well, sir.
Thank you. Other than that, I'm happy to take questions. Obviously, from our perspective, justice was more than served this morning. The defendant is now headed exactly where he belongs, which is a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole. So I'm happy to take questions.
Can you shed some light on when 2 little girls were killed?
I'll certainly call upon Mr. Blesch. Also, what I can tell you is that because of a whole host of reasons, not the least of which is we're not operating in the CSI TV world. Oftentimes, we can't determine exactly when or a time frame for cause or time of death. Particularly, I think that was complicated by where all of the different bodies were found and the amount of time that passed before their remains were recovered.
I agree.
Okay.
So how much time?
Well, We know that they were deposited in the locations where they were found.
Welcome to Dark Matters, True Crime, the channel where every case drags you deeper into the unknown. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we explore the darkest corners of the human mind.
August 13th, 2018. Frederick, Colorado. A quiet suburban street where life appeared ordinary. But behind the doors of the Watts family home, a nightmare had already begun. Shan'ann Watts and her daughters, Bella and Celeste, were missing. The world would soon learn their fates, but the question that lingered for investigators, and now for the public, was far darker. What were authorities choosing not to reveal? Shan'ann, 8 months pregnant, had a future others envied. She was vivacious, loving, active in her community, and fiercely devoted to her children. Chris Watts, her husband, worked long hours in the oil fields. To outsiders, they seemed like the perfect family, a picture of stability and happiness. Social media painted smiles over shadows, hiding the growing tension beneath.
Here we go, Steelers. Here we go. Ooh, ooh. Here we go, Steelers. Here we go. Ooh, ooh. Huh? I see a picture. Say cheese. Aw, say here we go, Steelers. Here we go. Ooh, ooh. Alright, she's done.
Honey.
He's a good guy.
I need my soda.
What's that tonight?
My soda.
You comfortable?
Yet, even in this seemingly perfect life, cracks existed. Chris's affair with a co-worker, Nickel Kessinger, was a secret that would later shatter the illusion completely. When the police arrived at the house that morning, something felt off. Reports and statements would later reveal inconsistencies. Timelines that didn't match, details that were vague, and investigative choices that raised questions. Why was the 911 call delayed? Why were certain areas of the home not immediately examined? Why did some pieces of evidence, later revealed to the public, feel like they were discovered almost by accident? These gaps left room for suspicion. Suspicion that the DA might have more information than was ever disclosed. The empty house became a stage for one of the most horrifying family murders in American history. Yet the shadows around the investigation suggested that not everything was being revealed. Questions hung heavy in the Colorado air. Was justice fully served, or was part of the story being kept from the public? If you want to dive deeper into the hidden truths of this case, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for Dark Matters True Crime, where we uncover the chilling secrets authorities don't always tell. The official story unfolded quickly. Chris Watts, a seemingly ordinary father, had confessed to murdering his pregnant wife and 2 young daughters. He claimed it was a moment of weakness, an impulse he couldn't control. But the speed and structure of the investigation left some asking uneasy questions. From the very beginning, there were decisions that didn't sit right with the public or some legal analysts. Why were certain pieces of evidence, such as Chris's cell phone location data and his initial inconsistent statements, revealed slowly, sometimes only after media pressure? Why were key interviews with friends, family, and co-workers summarized in press releases, rather than presented fully to the public? And most intriguingly, why did the DA choose to offer Chris a plea deal so quickly? One that bypassed a full trial where the full story could have been exposed? For some, the agreement felt less like justice and more like a shield, a way to prevent uncomfortable details from seeing the light of day. Consider the chilling gaps in the timeline. Chris's movements in the hours leading up to the murders were reconstructed largely through his own confessions, with limited corroborating evidence made public. Did investigators verify every detail independently, or did they rely on the narrative he offered? And why, in the court of public opinion, were the most disturbing aspects of the case, like the methodical disposal of the bodies and the apparent planning, framed as impulsive acts? For conspiracy-minded observers, it seemed as though the DA was controlling the story, deciding what the public could handle and what would remain buried. Every omission, Every selective release of information added weight to the unsettling theory. Perhaps there was more behind the Watts case than anyone had been told. The question now lingered like a shadow over Frederick. Was justice truly served, or was the truth being carefully curated, hidden behind prosecutorial discretion? If you're intrigued by the shadows of this case and the secrets authorities may be keeping, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for Dark Matters True Crime, where we explore the dark corners no one else dares to reveal.
Ready? Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who are not present in the courtroom today, I want to take a minute to summarize the nature of the proceedings at our status conference on People versus Christopher Watts this afternoon. Mr. Watts entered a plea of guilty to all 9 counts in the original complaint and information. Those counts include murder in the first degree after deliberation as to Shan'ann Watts, murder in the first degree as to Bella Watts, murder in the first degree as to Celeste Watts, unlawful termination of a pregnancy as it relates to Nico Watts, and 3 counts of unlawful tampering with a deceased human body. There was a sentencing agreement that calls for the defendant to be sentenced to the Department of Corrections for the remainder of his natural life as to counts 1, 2, and 3. All of those sentences will run consecutively to one another. There's also an agreement that whatever sentence the court imposes as to count 6 will also run consecutively to counts 1 through 3. The remainder of the sentencing will be left to the discretion of the court. That sentencing will occur November 19th at 10 o'clock in the morning. The final piece of the sentencing agreement calls for the district attorney's office, myself, to agree that as a result of his plea of guilty, that he will not face the death penalty. I know that there are going to be a lot of questions about that, so let me address that right up front. Present here in the room with us today is Frank Rusick, Sandra Rusick, and Frank Rusick Jr., Shanann's brother, mom and dad. Mr. Wren and I flew out to North Carolina about 3 weeks ago and spent quite a bit of time with the Rusick family talking about the state of the death penalty in Colorado, the realities of the death penalty. We explained to them the extraordinary delays that currently exist in the state of Colorado as the result of, in part, the actions of our current governor. We discussed the fact that an individual by the name of Nathan Dunlap was convicted and sentenced to death in 1996 and is still alive today. We discussed all of the possible consequences, delays, penalties, timeframes, and I hope I'm saying this accurately. I know they'll correct me if I am wrong, but they were very strongly in favor of a resolution in this case short of the death penalty. That, to me, was the most important consideration in deciding how to proceed with this case. However, as they know, after we had those meetings at their home in North Carolina, I came back and had meetings with all of the law enforcement partners you see standing up here today, with the supervisors in my office, in consultation with other district attorneys around the state, and to a person, the advice and suggestions that I was given was, you do what the victim's family wants you to do in this case. I don't know how I could have sat in Sandy's kitchen and asked her to commit the next 25 years of her life to the criminal justice system without any assurances that that sentence, if ever imposed, or excuse me, if ever obtained, would ever actually be imposed. I want to take an opportunity to thank the law enforcement partners who are standing up here and those who are not up here. This investigation, this prosecution, was exactly what local, state, and federal cooperation should look like. The Frederick Police Department, the Greeley Police Department, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, all worked in conjunction, with one another to present to our office a case that could give this resolution and hopefully this closure to Shan'ann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico's family. Understand that this is not over. As I said, we have a sentencing hearing in a couple of weeks. I'm going to give Director John Camper from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation an opportunity to say a few words here in a couple of minutes. But understand that at this point, I still can't answer questions about the facts surrounding the investigation because at least at this point, the judge has not formally accepted those guilty pleas and impose sentence. After that sentencing hearing, we will have an opportunity to answer the questions that I know many in the media, many in the public have had from the day this investigation started. But before we answer any questions, I want to invite up Director John Camper.
In every case that shocks the nation, there are whispers, little signs that something was off long before the tragedy. In the Watts case, these red flags were subtle, but once examined closely, they painted a chilling picture. Friends and neighbors recalled Chris as polite, calm, even charming, but those closest to him noticed cracks. Sudden irritability, moments of unexplained tension, and a growing detachment from his family. Some described him as emotionally distant, a man who could smile in public while harboring secrets no one could imagine. Yet, the official reports often skimmed over these details. Witness statements, filed with law enforcement, were summarized rather than released in full. Why? Some observers speculate the DA might have been cautious about revealing too much about Chris's personal life, perhaps to protect reputations, perhaps to prevent complicating the narrative. Every omission leaves a gap, and gaps are where suspicion thrives. Chris's affair with Nicole Kessinger was another layer. Investigators acknowledged it, but the timing, the nature, and the depth of the relationship were only partially disclosed. Did the DA decide certain details were too explosive for public scrutiny? Could there have been other interactions, other motives, quietly documented but never shared? Even the financial troubles, the bankruptcy filings, the mounting pressure of life were lightly touched on, almost as if they didn't matter, but in reality, they could explain the context for his actions. Then there were the crime scene inconsistencies. Small anomalies that forensic enthusiasts and armchair investigators immediately noticed. Why certain rooms were examined before others, why some evidence was photographed but not referenced publicly, why timeline reconstructions seemed overly reliant on Chris's own accounts. Each choice, each omission fueled speculation. The pattern began to emerge. Selective storytelling, controlled revelations, and unanswered questions. The red flags weren't just in Chris's life. They were in how the investigation and prosecution were handled. And the public began to wonder, was the DA hiding something deeper than simple procedural discretion? If the shadows of this case intrigue you, and you want to uncover more secrets the authorities may be keeping, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for Dark Matters True Crime, where we reveal the truths others won't.
They were found in the early morning hours of August 13th. They were recovered on August 16th. That's the best I can tell you from a timing.
The girlfriend you referenced in court, can you give us a better idea of her role in the investigation, how forthcoming she was, and how she helped?
She originally came forward and spoke to investigators on her own volition. Prior to the time, unfortunately, that she came in and spoke with investigators, she had deleted all of the information off of her phone that had any connection between her and Chris Watts. That hampered the investigation. That hampered our ability to get that electronic digital connection between the two. She was interviewed on multiple occasions. I believe that for the most part she was forthcoming in the course of those investigations. We don't have any reason to believe that she had any prior knowledge or involvement in the death of Shan'ann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico. I think that's the best way I can answer that. Yes, sir.
You said that you were leaving the door open for Chris Watts to make a statement in the future and hopefully answer questions. What information is it that you're specifically looking for?
How and why? And I don't think he'll ever answer those questions. Like I said in the courtroom this morning, and I think that the Rusick family said it very, very well as well, I don't think he will ever tell us. I don't think he will give an honest assessment of why he did what he did, how he did what he did. I intentionally called upon him to see if he would answer those questions in the courtroom this morning. Both his mother and through their attorney, his father, said that they hope that he will be honest and come clean someday and give us an account of what happened, because I think, like I said this morning, those are the questions that will always haunt anyone who was involved in the investigation, and I don't think that there is ever going to be a satisfactory answer for anyone, not the least of which is the Rusick family.
You mentioned several times in court that this was a deliberate act. Mm-hmm. Why do you believe it's a deliberate act? Do you believe he planned this before the night of to kill his family?
I don't have any information about any pre-planning or anything like that. Obviously, something like this in my mind doesn't just happen on the spur of the moment. But what I alluded to this morning, as it related specifically to Shan'ann, was the amount of time it takes for one human being to strangle another. And perhaps Mr. Blesh wants to comment on the timing as well. That demonstrates an incredible intent to cause someone's death. He did that 3 times. So to say that this was anything other than a deliberate, intentional killing is inaccurate, to say the least. Yes, sir.
You described Mrs. Watts as, it took a long time for her to die. Was there any defensive wounds on Mr. Watts, and can you have any evidence if she was asleep?
Take that.
He had one small mark on his neck that was observed the night he was originally interviewed. We don't know if that's related or not, but other than that, no. We had him photographed from head to toe that night, and nothing was observed that would be consistent with injuries to him as a result of a struggle.
Yeah, go ahead.
The original plea deal isn't the one you reached today, correct? And can you elaborate on what that would have been?
To be clear, there was only ever one plea deal, and that's the one that his attorneys brought to us. The deal, for lack of a better word, and I frankly despise that word.
The truth of what happened in the Watts household is horrific. Yet even in the retelling, there are shadows, gaps, and omissions that have fueled speculation. On August 13, 2018, Chris Watts murdered his wife Shan'ann and their 2 young daughters, Bella and Celeste. The official timeline claims the murders were impulsive, a sudden eruption of violence, but the details suggest a more calculated darkness. Chris later confessed, but his confessions, heavily mediated through law enforcement, left questions unanswered. Shannan's final hours, according to the narrative, involved routine activities, a prenatal appointment, interactions with friends, her usual attentiveness to her daughters. Chris returned home from work. Yet forensic evidence indicates that some events, such as the handling of the children and the timing of Shannan's death, are difficult to reconcile fully with his version of events. Why did the authorities present the timeline so neatly when forensic realities are messy and complex? What might have been omitted from official reports to maintain a clear, digestible narrative for the public? The disposal of the bodies raises further suspicion. Chris transported Shannan's body to an oil field, where she was buried in a shallow grave. Bella and Celeste were placed in oil tanks on the same property. These acts suggest planning and forethought, premeditation that contrasts with the idea of a spontaneous crime. Yet in court documents and press releases, much of the detail was selectively framed, emphasizing the plea and confession over meticulous reconstruction of events. Even the photographs, the crime scene evidence, and the police interviews were filtered through the DA's office. Observers note that the public only ever saw fragments, the pieces chosen carefully, the moments that fit the narrative the prosecution wanted to present. Every omission fuels the question: is there more about the crime itself that the public has never been told? The chilling truth remains. While the world saw a confession and a plea deal, the full story, the shadows behind the decision-making, the gaps in the timeline, the moments left unspoken, might still be hidden. If you want to explore the secrets that may never have been revealed, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for Dark Matters True Crime, where we dig deeper into the darkness authorities may keep buried. In the aftermath of the Watts murders, the investigation appeared thorough. Officers combed the home, interviewed neighbors, and eventually secured a confession. But beneath the surface, inconsistencies and unusual decisions suggest there may have been more going on than the public was told. From the beginning, key details were withheld, summarized, or filtered through official statements, leaving a sense that the narrative was being carefully controlled. Chris Watts initially denied any wrongdoing, portraying himself as a concerned husband. Yet, even as investigators began to uncover the horrific truth, the timeline of evidence release was puzzling. Surveillance footage, cell phone data, and even the discovery of the bodies were presented incrementally. Why were these elements not shared immediately, allowing the public or media to scrutinize them fully? Some suspect the DA's office may have chosen a deliberate strategy. control the story, release only what supports the official version, and prevent questions that might complicate the case. Forensic experts noted other anomalies. Certain rooms were examined in detail while others received only cursory attention. Interviews with friends and co-workers were summarized in reports, with full transcripts kept from public access. Even the plea deal itself, accepted mere months after the murders, left many asking why a trial, where every detail could have been dissected in court, was bypassed. Critics argue this fast-tracked approach limited the public's ability to see the full scope of Chris Watts' planning, motives, and mindset. These gaps leave a haunting possibility that selective disclosure shaped not just public perception, but also the story itself. The world was presented with a neat, horrifying narrative, a confession, a plea deal, and a clear, evil perpetrator. But what nuances, what uncomfortable truths, were deliberately hidden? The question lingers. In cases as sensational as this, how much of the investigation is real, and how much is curated? If you want to dive deeper into the shadows the authorities may be keeping, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for Dark Matters True Crime, where we uncover what's hidden behind official narratives.
Thanks, Mr. Rourke. I think it goes without saying when something so horrible happens, it's really not possible to be particularly celebratory. But that said, I think all of us are gratified at the outcome here, primarily for Shan'ann's family, but also the many investigators and other professionals, as Mr. Rourke said, some who are represented here and many who are not, who have devoted so much time, energy, and frankly emotion into this tragic case. Really all everyone wanted throughout was justice for Shan'ann and Bella and Celeste, and we're certainly pleased that this seems to be the outcome. So on behalf of the CBI and I think the other organizations and many who were involved in this, our deepest condolences to the Rusicks and their family and friends. Thank you.
I'll be happy to answer questions, but I will be the first to tell you that I truly appreciate the Rusicks being present, not only in the state of Colorado, but in this room. I can tell you on behalf of them, they are not prepared, nor do they want to answer questions at this point, and I hope you all will respect that. I will try to answer questions as best I can on their behalf, at least today. So what questions can I answer for you all?
Could the death penalty ever be imposed in the state of Colorado?
I don't know. We have a governor in office right now who, understandably, we have an election going on today. He is term limited. We have a governor who has refused to make a decision as it relates to Nathan Dunlap. I explained that to the Rusick family, and obviously that gives them some pause when I'm asking them to endure a 4 or 5 year delay prior to a trial, and many more years after that of appeals and post-conviction hearings before that sentence could ever possibly be imposed. So when the question was asked of me by their family, what is the realistic outcome of this particular case as it relates to the death penalty, the best I could tell them is I don't know.
You said that they requested that you not seek the death penalty. How did that affect your process?
I went through the same process I would have had their answer been different. I had in my mind from the day this occurred, the steps in the process that I felt like were due diligence in order to come to this decision. I don't think any elected district attorney ever wants to have to make a decision about whether or not to seek the death penalty as it relates to an individual. But when I have a family who has been so incredibly supportive and so incredibly firm in their belief that the death penalty not be sought, I don't know how I would have said to them, I'm going to do it anyway.
How early into the process was that decision made?
The decision was made about 4 days ago.
How was the family and how did the family react when you told them about this decision?
I think there were a lot of emotions that went through their mind, and again, they're going to throw something at me if I say something inappropriate. I think that there was a combination of relief, extraordinary sadness that we ever had to have that conversation in the first place. And I can only say that I hope there is a sense of closure. I know that that will never be fully realized because obviously the tragedy that sits before us today is the loss of 4 beautiful lives. And no matter what happens today, no matter what happens at a sentencing hearing down the road, We can't get them back. Sandy said it very, very poignantly to me. She said, he made the choice to take those lives. I do not want to be in a position of making the choice to take his. And so that's about as firmly as she could have said it to me, and that was very compelling to all of us.
When Chris Watts entered the courtroom, the world watched a man who appeared almost ordinary. The smiling father transformed into a figure of unspeakable horror. Yet even in this highly publicized trial, questions about the DA's handling lingered. Watts ultimately accepted a plea deal. Life in prison without the possibility of parole, sparing the state a full trial. On the surface, justice seemed swift and absolute. But beneath it, a sense of unease persisted. A trial would have demanded transparency. Every piece of evidence, the confessions, the timeline of Shan'ann's last hours, the forensic details, the body disposal methods, would have been meticulously presented. Witnesses would have testified, examined, and cross-examined. Instead, the plea deal fast-tracked the process, limiting public access to the deeper truths of the case. Why did the DA accept such a rapid resolution? Was it merely efficiency, or was it a way to control the story, preventing the full extent of the crime and the inconsistencies in the investigation from emerging under scrutiny? Even within court records, gaps exist. Some testimonies were summarized, certain interviews sealed, and evidence only selectively referenced. Legal analysts note that a plea deal this early, in a case of such magnitude, is unusual, and it raises questions about what may have been intentionally left out. The public received the outcome. Chris Watts was guilty, and the punishment was set. But the process itself, the decisions made behind closed doors by the DA, left shadows that still linger. For observers and skeptics, this sequence of events suggests deliberate curation. The DA controlled not only the courtroom but the narrative, framing Chris Watts as a single, isolated perpetrator and the case as resolved. Yet unanswered questions remain. Were there nuances about his motives, planning, or psychological state that never saw the light of day? What, if anything, was deliberately withheld? If you're captivated by the unseen corners of this case and want to explore the truths authorities may not tell, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for Dark Matters True Crime, where we investigate what's hidden behind the courtroom doors.
To visit family in North Carolina, the defendant went to car museums and the sand dunes with his new girlfriend. The stark contrast between the subjects of their internet and text content is absolutely stunning. Even the morning after he killed them and disposed of their bodies, he made several phone calls. One was to the school where the girls were supposed to start, telling the school that the girls would not be coming to school anymore, that they were being unenrolled, presumably to give him some more time before law enforcement notification about them going missing. He contacted a realtor to start discussing the selling of his house, and he texted with his girlfriend about their future. None of this answers the questions of why, however. If he was this happy and wanted a new start, get a divorce. You don't annihilate your family and throw them away like garbage. Why did Nico, Celeste, Bella, and Shan'ann have to lose their lives in order for him to get what he wanted? Your Honor, justice demands the maximum sentence under the agreement reached by the parties. As you will recall, the agreement calls for life sentences as to Shan'ann, Bella, and Celeste, and all of those to run consecutively to one another. It also calls for the count of unlawful termination of a pregnancy as to Nico to run consecutively to counts 1, 2, and 3. I would suggest that the extreme aggravation present in the defendant's conduct and in the efforts that I have described mandate that the sentences for counts 7, 8, and 9, the tampering with a deceased human body, each be the maximum of 12 years, and that those sentences run consecutively to one another. It is very clear that each of these acts, that these were not the subject of one act, but each oil tank that he walked up with his daughter's bodies and the hole that he dug for his wife and unborn son mandate a mandatory consecutive sentence. It's been alluded to this morning, but the defendant was certainly eligible for the death penalty in this case. under the existing law in the state of Colorado. As you heard, Shan'ann's family strongly opposed my office seeking the death penalty and being bound to the criminal justice system for the next several decades. That's in large part, as you've heard, why we have reached the agreement that we have. 4 lives were lost at the hands of the defendant on August 13th for reasons that we will never fully understand, nor will we know. In the end, the Rusick family was much more merciful towards him than he was towards his wife, his daughters, and his unborn son. Prison for the remainder of his life is exactly where he belongs for murdering his entire family. Thank you.
Are you seeking 91?
The Watts murders left Frederick, Colorado, and the nation in shock. Friends, neighbors, and family were engulfed in grief so deep it seemed almost unbearable. Shan'ann's parents spoke publicly about the loss of their daughter and 2 grandchildren, voices trembling with heartbreak, demanding answers. Friends recalled Bella's laughter, Celeste's curiosity, Shan'ann's radiant energy, memories that now carried unbearable weight. Yet, amid the mourning, questions quietly festered. Had authorities told the whole truth? Community members noted inconsistencies in the public narrative. Some wondered why details of Chris Watts' confessions emerged in fragments, often days or weeks apart. Why did the DA allow press conferences to present selective information rather than comprehensive evidence? Parents questioned how such horrors could occur so close to home, and why certain timelines, interviews, and forensic details were withheld from public view. For many, the official story didn't fully align with their understanding of events. Even within the family, doubts arose. While Shan'ann's loved ones struggled to process the unimaginable, some began to wonder about the broader context. Was Chris acting alone in ways the public never learned? Were there warning signs in the investigation that were downplayed or omitted? Every unanswered question, every selective disclosure, added to the grief with a layer of suspicion. Social media and online communities buzzed with speculation. Armchair investigators dissected the DA's statements, timelines, and press releases. To them, the gaps weren't oversights. They were doors left open, inviting questions about what the prosecution might have intentionally withheld. Each post, each theory underscored the unease that justice, while legally served, may have been presented in a way that controlled the narrative rather than fully revealed it. As the community mourned, a shadow lingered. Could the full truth ever be known, or had parts of it been quietly buried along with the victims? If you want to explore the untold stories and the secrets authorities may be keeping, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for Dark Matters True Crime, where we dig into what the world isn't being told.
I felt compelled to get on a plane and go see the Rusicks in North Carolina because that was a conversation that I was only going to have with them face to face. Go ahead, Carol.
There's a lot made about DNA on the little girl's necks. Now that we know they were smothered, did that ever come into play? DNA on their necks?
No, it didn't. Yeah. Sorry, I meant, yeah, we'll go back behind first.
There's a letter that's circulating around in social media that apparently Chris sent his family a week prior to the murders, where he's saying, if anything happens to me or the girls, I would have never hurt my daughters. Is there anything to that? Is that legitimate? And it seems to me it shows that he was planning this at least a week ahead of time.
You're seeing a lot of puzzled looks up here because none of us have ever heard that. I've never seen that on social media. I confirmed just by the look on his face with Detective Baumhover, we have never seen and nor heard of any such letter or its existence before. I'm sure that if it was in any way, shape, or form real, we would have heard about it. Go ahead.
And you were describing some of those very gruesome and horrific details. The judge himself even seemed to be a little bit emotional about that.
Right.
Can you talk to us about what that's like for you standing there and seeing him have that kind of reaction?
It's not something that I relished. Mr. Wren and I and Mr. Miller, the assistant DA, met at my house yesterday for several hours to talk through the comments that we wanted to make. And we all recognized that in order for the court to impose a just sentence, a fair sentence under the circumstances, that he had to know as much information as we could give him in a respectful fashion. Like I said, he had never read most of that. He had seen an affidavit which had some of the very preliminary information that Detective Baumover put on paper. But I felt like it was important for the judge to understand the horror that was involved in this case. Even though in the end of the sentence, for the defendant, it's not going to matter if he gets 1 consecutive, 2 consecutive, 3 consecutive life sentences. It doesn't matter in the end what number is attached to the end of those. It certainly matters to the Rusick family. It certainly matters to law enforcement and to my office, and I hope it matters to the public. When we're saying, you know what, there is a sentence that was imposed today that is reflective of the actions he took as to each and every one of his victims. Yeah, go ahead.
If I'm remembering correctly, you all searched the location where the bodies were found before Christopher Watts had admitted to you all. How did you determine the location of the bodies?
GPS.
How did you know where to look?
On his work truck, he had a GPS device that showed the path of travel that he took when he left his home that morning. It showed at various increments the time that it would have taken him to get to various spots. So the CBI, FBI, Frederick Police knew where he had gone immediately after leaving his home that morning, which caused some of the initial searches with drones and foot searches. Only after he gave us that information did they have a more specific place to look.
Did he appear to text his coworker that he could take the morning shift before or after he murdered his family?
There were text messages on Sunday afternoon, a text message, I should say, between he and a coworker talking about the work schedule. The investigation that law enforcement conducted indicated that wasn't necessarily out of the ordinary, but in conjunction with everything else we know, became an important fact for us in his efforts to have time to dispose of the bodies in the manner in which he did. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious if during your investigation, if you guys found any evidence, anything suggesting that he'd have violent tendencies?
No.
Any mental problems or even low intelligence?
No, none of the above. Yeah, Kevin.
It sounded like from the statement of Mr. and Mrs. Watson, who may have met with you or people from your office over the weekend. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
What you shared with them, what you talked about?
Mr. Wren met with him.
When the court issued its order recognizing them as victims under the Victim Bill of Rights, our office agreed to meet with them, and I met with them for several hours last night with their attorney that was present in the courtroom today and one of our victim witness assistants. We had what I consider to be a good conversation. It was awkward and tough in some respects for obvious reasons, but I think ultimately they wanted to know the facts that we knew, and they wanted to know what was going to come out today. And they felt like they had been deprived of that information, and so consistent with our obligations under the statute, I provided them with that information. And I think it changed their perspective a little bit on what was going to happen today.
As you know, a week ago they were questioning whether their son actually had done all of these things. Do you feel like this sort of brought this to a place in terms of how they
I do. I think in the middle of that conversation that they came to a realization about the extent of the evidence that we had and why we were making the decisions we made, why we charged them with the things that we charged him with, why we were so convinced that he committed these crimes and that it didn't happen the way that Chris Watts had initially told the police. And so I can't speak for them per se, but my impression from our conversation was that, and I think it's consistent with what they said in court today, is that they're in a little bit different place emotionally as to what they feel their son did, and they're trying to get their head around that, which has been difficult and understandably so.
Yes, please. No. The story that you all have had from the affidavit in which he falsely claimed that Shan'ann had responsibility for the death of the two girls was the only statement that he gave until his pleas of guilty in the courtroom.
And then was a PSI ever done or any
No.
psychological evaluation?
No. Well, there was no PSI done. There was no reports done between the time of his guilty plea and today's sentencing hearing. Yes?
The judge
exactly the same. Absolutely horrifying. All of us standing up here, I think, have dealt with a number of serious crimes, but when you take a look at this one and you take a look at the death of those children, and like I said this morning, the death of Shan'ann, none of these things had to happen. And the manner in which they were disposed of showed a complete and utter disregard for any kind of human decency at all. Yes, sir.
This started out as a missing persons case. At what point did Chris Watts become a suspect?
Very, very early on. Many of the things that he was saying just weren't quite adding up. The Frederick Police Department, the CBI, the FBI did an amazing job from the very outset to begin to focus on him, and rightly so. I think that you saw in a matter of 3 days a gruesome triple homicide, including a pregnant woman, solved, is a testament to the efforts of the men and women who participated in this investigation. I think it was very clear from the outset that he was responsible for this and frankly was pulling the wool over the eyes of the media, to the extent that anybody in the media believed him, let's put it that way. Yeah. Well, everything from the fact that she was, they were still in bed sleeping when he left the home in the early morning hours to go to work, yet her vehicle was still there, her car keys were still there, her wallet, her purse, her cell phone, which she never went anywhere without, were all still inside the home. The home, when law enforcement arrived, was locked up tight from the inside. The only way that the law enforcement could get in was getting Mr. Watts there with a garage door opener to let law enforcement in. There was no way anyone was going to get into that house as a stranger, do something to that family, and get back out and leave the house locked up in that manner. I think that was probably the most compelling thing that struck law enforcement almost immediately. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
He also made some phone calls early the morning of the 13th, first to the children's school and then to a realtor, which were very odd and inconsistent with the rest of his conduct that day and what he was telling the media and police.
There is, and I know that that's going to be still the subject of some probate proceedings. You know, off the top of my head, I can't remember. I apologize. I don't remember the answer to that question. Kevin.
You talk about restitution. Is there any hope that there's going to be restitution in this case? Significant restitution?
There will be significant restitution because